Welcome back to Jason's Game Room, everyone. Great to have everybody back on this week's show. I hope you liked last week's show, which was the first in this new series. I enjoyed making it. It's not every day you get to start up a new podcast / video series on YouTube, but as I mentioned, gaming is a passion of mine, and I wanted to start going in depth on it and getting into it as much as I can, because gaming's gaming, man. It's fun. It's awesome. There's always going to be gaming, so we got to talk more about it. Whereas last week, I started off the series talking about a killer video game on the PS3. This week, I'm going to go straight into the world of customizable card games, also known as CCGs for short, with my personal favorite CCG, and that being the Star Trek Customizable card game. Now, for those of you that don't know, it's actually started out life as the Star Trek The Next Generation customizable card game, mainly because when Decipher started the game in 1994 to get into the CCG craze, they only had the license and properties for The Next Generation, nothing else. Because of that, the game started off with only 4 affiliations: Federation, Klingon, Romulan, and non-aligned, which was essentially a miscellaneous group of characters and ships that didn't fit into anything else. Because it was a Star Trek card game, and because there was only 4 affiliations and only based in the one show, it wasn't very appealing for everybody right off the start. Whereas with Magic, which came out a year before in 1993, anybody could jump into that. You didn't have to be a fan of any one thing. Magic was magic, which I will talk about on a future show. But I got into Star Trek, the card game, because of already being a big Star Trek fan, so it appealed to me at that sense. I didn't care about the limitations at the time, and even though I'm not a patient person, I figured that they were going to improve the game over time, and I'm going to get into some of the expansions and cards as well. Before I get too far, I'm going to say that I'm only going to be talking about the first edition, which is abbreviated as 1E. As far as I'm concerned, the second edition, which was 2E, was complete trash. It was never a good idea, and it led to the downfall of the game, and to a lesser extent the company. That's just in my opinion, but I'm not the only gamer that said that over the years. I used to play with a lot of 1E players back in the day, and I don't know any of them that jumped into 2E, or the occasional person that did maybe try 2E and actually liked it. There was none of that. First edition was the best incarnation, was the best way to go. In my opinion, they should never have dropped 1E in favor of 2E. But moving right along, enough about that. The game setup is different than what you'd expect, say, in Magic or another card game, where in those types of card games, you customize your deck, you draw your 6 or 7 cards, and you start playing immediately. In the Star Trek card game, and this was one of the things that made it unattractive at the start, there's different phases. There is the seed phase, in which each player takes turn putting down a mission. And then when the missions are all set up, which is your space line, each player then takes turns seeding dilemma cards underneath the missions. A dilemma card is an obstacle for a ship and crew when they're staffed and able to head out on the space line to encounter. And your crew and ship have to pass those dilemmas to attempt a mission to make the points. In an overall sense, the whole object to win a round of Star Trek card game is to score 100 points, or in some remote cases, completely annihilate your opponent while having more points. But the dilemmas stop you from completing the mission, which means you don't get the points, which means you can't win. It seems extensive, but when you've played the game from the start, as I have, and like I said, it's back in 94, it's a long time, so I've been playing for 26 years? You kind of understand it very quickly. It's not a hard game to learn. It does drag you down the seed phase. Friends and I, when we'd play at home, we'd sometimes do house rules where there would be no seed phase. Everybody would just put everything down at once to get it over with. Aside from that, the gameplay is pretty good. You're basically adding personnel and ships and equipment to help you on these missions. You're beaming down to planets to get points to advance yourself so you can get those 100 points and win the game, while simultaneously trying to stop your opponent with interrupt cards, who's trying to counter your event cards, things like that. There's many different card types. I don't have time to get into every kind of card that's in the game. Needless to say, it's a very involved game, but it's a lot of fun. I had a lot of good rounds back in the day, and I had some fun at tournaments as well. So, when the game came out, it came out with the Premier set. It was a 363 card set, sold in 60 card starter decks and 15 card boosters. It was good for a start. They didn't have enough to vary the game, to add a lot of variables, which was probably the only thing that pissed me off about the game. But about a year later, when they introduced the alternate universe expansion, it added a different dynamic to the game where you could have characters and ships and cards from the past and present show up, providing you had certain card types to allow them. Q Continuum showed up a year after that. That was a good expansion because Q is an awesome character in the Next Generation and subsequent series. For him to get his own expansion, it was very interesting because it changed the way that you would build your decks, and it also introduced side decks. And a side deck would be a much smaller deck that you'd keep aside, hence the name, and you could pull cards out of it with the Q flash and really piss off your opponent, and it was good for that. I had a friend that used side decks too often, and he got his after a while because I just put together a deck that he couldn't stop. The next big jump in the game, I want to say first Anthology, because it had the Warp Pack, which were special cards that Decipher came out with once in a while, just for us fans, to play nice, give us a little treat. Unfortunately, the first Anthology was a lot of a rehash. You'd have some premium cards, you'd have 60 card starter sets, 15 card packs of boosters in there. So if you wanted to start the game in a big way and had never played before, you'd buy the first Anthology and you'd be good to go right out of the box. One of my favorite expansions, and this came out in 1997, was First Contact, because this brought out the Borg. And for me, this was huge because a while after that, I created my all-powerful Borg Deck, which is actually sitting right to the left of my microphone. This Borg Deck has never been defeated by anyone, house rules or tournament rules, and you'd think I'd have a trophy from a tournament to show, but I actually got kicked out of a tournament because some kid I was playing didn't like some of the cards, and long story short, there was a new ban list that came out the day before, but no one decided to tell anyone that was sanctioning a tournament. Go figure. Well, it's a shame. I got kicked out in the second round. I could have easily won that tournament and had my grand prize of $500, which would have been a lot of money for me back then. A year after that, Deep Space Nine came out. That was a huge expansion because you could play that standalone. There was over 300 cards in that set. You could just jump right into Deep Space Nine and play that way, or you can combine it with all the other cards. That also helped bring about the expansions known as Dominion, Blaze of Glory, and Rules of Acquisition. They were great additions. Enhanced First Contact was okay. I don't really get the overlay because you only had one in certain packages, and not everybody kept them because they accidentally thought that they were not a keepsake or part of the game. The official tournament sealed decks were great. I remember buying a couple. As when they first came out, believe it or not, they were on sale at the place I bought them from. And unfortunately, the game started going downhill. A lot of players got bored. And then we got into some of the expansions. The trouble with Tribbles never really made sense to me. They did use that as a launching point to launch the Tribbles card game, which was stupid. Then they did Enhanced Premier, which was re-releasing whiteboarded Premier and warp packs and all that. Mirror Mirror was okay. Voyager was a great expansion because it introduced the Delta Quadrant. And the subsequent expansion for that, which was the Borg, added more Borg to the game, mainly Delta Quadrant Borg, but it helped. If you're a Borg person at that point in time, hey, I want more Borg, sure. And now this is at the tail end of the game's popularity because the last few Expansions, which were the motion pictures, were lackluster. All Good Things was bleh. The Enterprise Collection, I never really watched Enterprise series. I didn't like it, and I never bothered with that set. Genesis was the last set of 1E. It was made to be compatible with 2E. I never bothered with that one either, because at that point, in my opinion, the game was dying. 2E had come out at that time, and you know my feelings on that. But the Star Trek card game has always been a fun game to play. You have a lot of great cards that do things in there. You got Kevin Uxbridge Convergence. You've got Anti-Time Anomaly, Rescue. You got cards like Metaphasic Shields and Nutational Shields, which give your ships an instant boost, providing you don't get nullified. Or you can do like a friend of mine used to do, bring out Auto-Destruct on your buddy's ship that's fully staffed, blow it up and take him out. There's too many good cards to get into, and I don't want to drone on about every card in the game, but needless to say, it was a great game overall. Unfortunately, it's that time where I have to get into the highs, the lows, and the downright dirty. The highs of the game, there was many. It was an easy startup. You could get booster packs whenever you needed them. It was a fun game to play if you had Trekkie friends. A good time was had by all. The lows of the game, as I mentioned before, the seed phase was a huge pain in the ass because, believe it or not, the seed phase could take an upwards of 20-25 minutes if you weren't paying attention properly. Especially if you had an inexperienced player. Oh, man. That tournament I was at that I got kicked out of, my opponent, man, his seed phase, I almost banged my head into the table in frustration. Another low I want to talk about in that game very briefly is the way battling was done until the Blaze of Glory expansion. The battling was very lackluster, and that took away from the game. They did fix it, but they could have done something sooner to make space battles seem a lot more exciting. And downright dirty was the fact that Decipher almost let the game die in 1997 until they started buying up the other licenses. At that point in time, it almost seemed like they didn't give a shit about the game, and then all of a sudden they gave a shit. And unfortunately, the other downright dirty was bringing out the second edition, which I hate. It sucks. I don't think you'll find a gamer out there that says, "Oh my God, second edition's great." No. Nobody says that. I don't care. That's all for this week's show. I hope you enjoyed it. Remember to like, subscribe, share the video, tell all your friends, and, of course, game on, baby.